Hello, everyone. Dr. Stillman here. And today, Jim and I are going to be talking about the importance of breathing mechanics. Obviously, Jim is a personal trainer of 20 some years, sees a lot of people breathing and using what we call dysfunctional breathing patterns. As a physician, I remember diving down into this area of the literature about a year ago now when I completed Patrick McKeown's Oxygen Advantage Instructor's course and read his book. People who are watching this may have already heard a lot about this, but I wanted to take some time today for us to unpack really what we see in, clients in the case of a personal trainer and patients in the case of a doctor, what hyperventilation syndrome is, how dysfunctional breathing affects people, and why it's really important for us to talk about it and for people to know about it. So
absolutely. And I think the thing to take into account with this, like everything in this industry, these are all rabbit holes that you can fall down and never, ever, ever come out of.
That's right.
And
McKeown makes a full-time gig out of talking about breathing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are definitely people that need specialists. But as a coach, it's my job to give people like the kind of Reader's Digest 10,000 foot view and to give them something that's actually applicable to them, because people today are running around with a chicken with their head cut off. They don't have a lot of time. Part of the reason they're not in a good place is because they don't have a lot of time, and they're not going to watch a 2-hour breathing, presentation like you and I will. They don't geek out about this stuff. To put it really simply, your nose is a filter. Okay. The more you breathe through the nose, the more efficient that breathing is going to be. It cleans out all sorts of impurities. Like if the people in charge were truly concerned about the health and the well-being of people in this country and around the world, they would have focused on teaching people to breathe through their nose instead of you wearing a face diaper, okay? Because that would filter out. And also, not to go off on too much of a side tangent, also testing, okay? If there is dirt in your air filter in your car, does that mean there's dirt in your engine? No, that means the filter did its job. So if you've got something in your nose, it doesn't necessarily mean you actually have it in your body. There was a country in Europe that instead of doing a diaper mandate, they used a diluted betadine solution and had them spray. I can't remember what country it was, but had them spray it in people's noses, a rinse to kind of sanitize their nose every day. I don't know if you'd heard about that, but
I didn't know.
That was how
I've heard people talk about this.
That's how they combated the whole
current
crisis,
events,
whatever you want to call it, without face diapers. So basically, breathing through your nose is more efficient. When I was powerlifting, I used to breathe through my mouth and get hyped up and get worked up to help get me excited and basically worked up to do this big lift. Okay. Mm-hmm. The problem is if you constantly overbreathe and you constantly breathe through your mouth, you're in this constant state of alert. Okay. And it's exhausting. So for people like us that do a lot of podcasts, people that are teachers, for me, I do tons of group training with athletes and I'm constantly talking. That is mouth breathing. That's a lot harder on your nervous system. So when I'm driving in my car, I will put the tongue on the roof of my mouth and I will slow my breathing down to the point where I feel like I have to breathe. And so basically, if you look at Pateco and what they teach, the less you breathe, the more oxygen you absorb, the more nitric oxide you produce. The more relaxed you are, the more rest and digest you get. The more you breathe, the less oxygen you absorb, the more you have to, you basically use the diaphragm less, you start using your neck muscles more, and it's not as efficient. It's a lot harder on your body. So if you're a teacher or someone like us who coach a lot, after I'm done this Zoom call, I'm going to basically walk around in my house, kitchen, whatever. I'm going to put the tongue and roof of my mouth and I'm going to consciously slow my breathing down as slow as I can when I'm in like Publix or Whole Foods or wherever. Tongue in the roof of my mouth, slow my breathing down when I'm driving, when I'm on my motorcycle, tongue in the roof of my mouth, slow my breathing, breathe as little as possible. Yeah. And that's going to help pull me out of the, the opposite extreme that I spend, a lot of my day in.
Yeah, and the physiology you just highlighted there is really paradoxical for people to hear. They're very surprised to hear that the more they breathe, the less oxygen they're going to absorb. And so for people who want to understand how this basically works, the more you breathe, yes, you will bring in more oxygen, but you won't necessarily absorb it. You'll saturate the amount of oxygen you can carry. The sensation of being out of breath is not actually the sensation of low oxygen or that's caused by low oxygen. It's actually high levels of carbon dioxide. And so that's why when you're exercising, you feel out of breath. But if you put on a pulse oximeter that measures your oxygen levels in your blood, you will actually have a completely normal blood oxygen level. And many of you will be surprised that if you, I'm not, not practicing medicine by the internet, full disclosure, don't do anything that's not safe. But if you hold your breath, you'll notice that when you feel out of breath, your oxygen level is not low. It's normal. It takes a long time for those levels to drop. I know from, having trained and done some free diving that, it takes me minutes sometimes to drop my oxygen levels, even when I'm feeling incredibly out of breath. The thing that carbon dioxide does that people don't appreciate is that, number one, it causes the hemoglobin molecule to change shape and it kicks the oxygen off of it. And then the second thing that it does really is that it increases blood flow. It opens your blood vessels. That's why if you hyperventilate, because when you hyperventilate, you're expelling carbon dioxide. And as you expel it, you're then going to have lower and lower levels in your bloodstream. That's why if you hyperventilate, you can pass out. It's also why if you hyperventilate, you can then hold your breath and you can really drop your oxygen levels. That's actually very dangerous if you're diving. It's why freedivers routinely and are always taught, don't hyperventilate before a dive, because it really increases your likelihood of blacking out, because your early warning system isn't the drop in oxygen in your blood, it's actually the rise in carbon dioxide. So this really surprises people, but I am constantly looking at what is someone's breathing mechanics. I'm watching it in the Zoom calls I'm on. I'm watching it when I'm in person with them as a patient. I'm asking them questions about it. One of the first questionnaires I send them is the Nemagen questionnaire that actually assesses for this, because if a patient is hyperventilating, I know that no amount of drugs, surgeries, pills, potions, magical blankets, magical thinking, meditation is actually going to help that patient. Maybe somewhat helpful, but it's not going to resolve the problem. You have to really take care of these dysfunctional breathing mechanics, which have also a very powerful effect on the autonomic nervous system. And this comes back to what Jim was saying. Before a power lift, you're in the power lift, you need to exert maximal strength and energy. So what do you want? You want all the adrenaline, all the dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, these chemicals that make you stronger, faster, tougher. These are the things that are secreted from the adrenal gland in response to stress. What's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is actually done by freedivers. Freedivers want to use as little oxygen as possible so that they generate as little carbon dioxide as possible so they can stay down at low depth without breathing for as long as possible. So what do their breathe ups, as they call them before they dive, consist of? They take very slow, long breaths, and they have a very prolonged expiratory phase, which means that they're taking a long time to exhale. And they're using diaphragmatic breathing. And all of this will really turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. And so you'll see this in your heart rate, your blood pressure. And people really don't, hear in common, the mainstream media or mainstream circles, that just the way you breathe can radically alter your blood pressure, your pulse rate, how you're thinking, how you're feeling, how you're really performing in life.
Yeah. And the thing is too, your body position eventually also contributes to that.
Yeah.
As you become more of a neck and lat breather and you're not breathing through your nose as much, your body will actually, go into extension, and that'll become your main go-to. Your rib cage will flare up because your neck and your traps are becoming your main breathing mechanics. So it's important. And in exercise for powerlifting and other sports, that extended position is used to create strength. And it does create strength in a way, but it also drives that dysfunction. So when you're doing exercise programming, you're going to want to do things that help restore the rib cage and belly button basically relationship. When you're dealing with pelvic floor disorders and all those sort of things, the diaphragm and the pelvic diaphragm not being lined up, and this position is a big part of a lot of those dysfunctions as well. So, and that in that case as well, for me, it's about choosing exercises that are not going to drive people further into extension and drive that breathing pattern even fuller. But the big thing is if you get people to basically breathe through their nose and be aware of it, it's going to help mitigate a lot of that and get people breathing more with their diaphragm. But you want to take care of those big rocks and give people in the beginning simple things that they can do. And then once they start feeling better, you can give them more and more and more. Because a lot of times in our business, you vomit all these million things on people and they're never able to do any of them. So if we can pick one or two things to help people with and develop a good habit, a lot of these things are very powerful. And sometimes people only need one or two habits to get themselves going in the right direction.
Yeah, one of the things I stress with patients who are coming to me for, really trying to get as much progress on a chronic disease as possible is that many of them, because of the sales narratives that are out there and because of, so just sort of the way that people tend to think, many of them are thinking, well, what I need is ozone, or what I need is, UV blood irradiation, or what I need is, hormones or some kind of really heroic treatment. It's not that doesn't have a place, obviously, right?
Right.
But the reality of it is that people who want to start with things like that before they've been evaluated for things like this are asking,
Right.
hey, can I go put 500 pounds on the barbell and then bench that,
Right.
without a spotter?
And you can't even do a push-up.
It's really a mistake.
Right.
And the other piece of that really I find heartbreaking is how many patients come to me having spent tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars on their health. And no one has done something as simple as putting them through a basic screening process for, does this person have dysfunctional breathing mechanics? Because when you really get into the literature on this and the studies and the case reports, the people who have really bad breathing mechanics, they have many, many, many serious end organ medical problems. And those problems do not respond to medical management, as I mentioned before. And one last note on nitric oxide, because you've mentioned it twice. One of the things that I think is so important about this is that nitric oxide is produced in the nose. It's also a vasodilator and it is an immunomodulator. And the literature on how nitric oxide does this is voluminous. I mean, there's tons of papers out there. What I haven't been able to figure out based on reviewing those papers is how nitric oxide really works. What I can tell you, though, is the people who tend to have problems with the systems of their body that have to do with nitric oxide, I'm never surprised to hear that they're mouth breathers. So my suspicion is strongly that just by breathing through your nose, no matter whether you need more nitric oxide or less nitric oxide, the body's naturally going to auto-regulate it that. And then that means for me, anyone coming in with, fatigue, allergies, autoimmune problems, sleep issues, hormone dysregulation, blood flow issues, blood pressure, palpitations, heart disease, I'm looking at that person for those dysfunctions. I'm curious, Jim, my evaluations, not like yours, I'm looking for mouth breathing. I'm looking for, are they out of breath? I'm looking for when they pause, do they leave their mouth hanging open or do they shut it?
I'm looking for a lot of those things too when I work with people.
Yeah, I'm looking for, are they sighing a lot? Because that's a big tell. Are they coughing a lot? Do they sniff or sneeze a lot? And I'm also looking for, chest excursion. Is their chest rising a lot, or do they seem to be more of a diaphragmatic breather? But on Zoom calls, and then in the short evaluations that I have in the clinic, I don't always have time to observe that. I'm curious what you look for when somebody's coming into the gym.
Well, I think you also get nitric oxide from sun exposure too, correct?
That is true. So what happens in sun exposure is the UV light triggers production of or expression of endothelial nitric oxide synthase. So it's being produced in the skin that way. Yeah,
sure. And not to go off on too big of a rabbit hole here, but that's why you see so many people, males today, struggle with erectile dysfunction. Most people don't realize that having an erection is actually being able to relax. Okay. So if you're in a constant state of hyper breathing and you're not breathing through your nose, you're not going to produce nitric oxide. You're not going to be able to relax. Right. So people are overstressed and, then they have to end up taking something to help them with their nitric oxide. But, that's a big part of a big misunderstanding people have that, arousal for a man is actually a state of relaxation. And, but as far as people in the gym going from one extreme to the other, I look at how they're standing. I look at when I ask them to take a breath, do they shrug? Because a lot of people will be like, take a breath, getting them to learn how to breathe in easy and circumferentially, like the rib cage should expand and then it should contract. Putting them on the floor, seeing if their rib cage is like pointed to the ceiling. Like that's something I look at. I look at, how extended they are. I try not to get too deep into that. The biggest thing when I work with people, I take a look at where they are. I listen to their problems and try to evaluate where they're at. And I try to give them one or two, little things to work on. And then as time progresses, I work on more and more things, some things to help not correct, but to give people more variability. So basically people get stuck in a strategy and then sometimes their brain needs a reminder of how to get out of that strategy. Simply like rounding over a stability ball, like a big bouncy ball, and letting your shoulder blades come together and breathing so that you drive air into your upper back can help get some air into your upper back and help provide some variability. Like hanging off a doorpost and stretching your upper back out and getting your low back into flexion can help. There's all sorts of different resets and things you can do. Somebody that's really extended like me, like a backwards bear crawl, will help get their pelvis in a little bit of more posterior pelvic tilt and give them a little more of a reach overhead to help kind of give them some variability in that rib cage. So those are just some simple things that I look at. Having people blow up a balloon is a good way to get people to exhale, so that they can learn how to exhale. If somebody is stuck in inhalation, I've seen people that literally could not blow up a balloon. Getting them to crunch over like this and then have them blow up a balloon is a good way to help get people to learn how to relax, because you relax when you exhale. And a lot of people are stuck in this compression strategy where they're using compression and extension to basically breathe. They're in a state of inhalation, right? So you have to give them the ability to learn how to exhale. And those are just a couple simple ways to do that. But for most people, it's like when you're in Walmart, put the tongue on the roof of your mouth and breathe through your nose. And then, add some things into your program. If you go to my Instagram, you'll see all sorts of different exercises that make you, and I talk a ton about getting the rib cage in a better position, giving people simple stuff, way they can modify exercises to get that belly button and rib cage together, as opposed to the traditional bodybuilding powerlifting where, arch, pull your shoulder blades together, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So we could talk about this all day, but
yes,
covers the basics. Thanks everyone for watching. Apply to work with myself and Jim at stillmanmd.com. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day. If this video has been helpful to you, make sure that you check out my link tree below to find out how you can keep in touch with me best. And if you would like to become a patient at my practice, please apply to work with me at stillmanmd.com. Thank you again for watching. Have a great day.